but now the volume's on, so, all right, great. Thanks, bye. See, this way, she's watching it.
Yeah, you'll have technical
I'm gonna,
difficulties monitor.
from her. She's like, I'm watching it, but there's no sound. I'm like, I know.
All our chit chat goes across the sound waves there.
Have you heard any more information about what happened with St. John's?
I don't pay any attention to that.
Francine, she said that the parents were not told. They did not. The parents were not told. They were just told to pick up their children. They did. They don't even know why.
Him and St. Thomas.
So I was just wondering.
So anyway, I don't know what else is going on. So. All right, what are we up to? We got another 3 more minutes. For those who are online, just know that you're about a minute behind us. One of the things I'm having a little discussion is that when we use a computer, they actually show you could set it up, if we actually did this, where you'd see all the cameras. So you can decide which one you want. So maybe I'll get that for you.
Thank you.
To get the computer in.
Maybe some headphones so I can hear the audio on the call.
It's true.
And this is very funny.
That's true.
When anyone rang the bell at our house, my mom.
The other thing is, it would be nice is if there were, people could type in, if we had, you got to bring all your friends here. We have to have one monitoring the comments on Facebook, one monitoring on YouTube, one monitoring on the parish website.
If you gave me like an iPad with like the comments, I could say, hey, someone has a question or comment.
I know. It would be nice to be that interaction. She says, Doris just texted me and said, where are you? We only see that the class is on for you. So you're going to switch it over? There we go. All right. All right. So she hears me, but she doesn't see the thing. That's why you got to know what the people are watching. And if I point to anything that's up there, you got to turn it all around.
Immediately.
All right.
Hey, David, take my phone and you can see if there's any Facebook comments that come up. We'll have to have like a couple of Assign a person to each thing.
hello. I was afraid some of you wouldn't come back with no storm, So
Most of the comments are just like,
yeah.
good evening, prayer hands.
Good evening, prayer hands. All right, so we're getting close to. Let's start. We can. It's 6:30, but if anybody comes in, I always do a review at the beginning anyway. So we can kind of do some business, get the business out of the way. Hopefully, none of you drove here last week. I mean, right, with the snowstorm, because it was
Pretty bad.
it was pretty bad. All right, so if you're here, this is the class on adult Catholic education for drawing your kids back to church. If you were for the other class that's down the hall, you can go down there. I'm just kidding. So, all right. Yeah. So, remind you that, and we already worked this out, that if you go to the parish website, princeofpeace.me / or actually this one is this is the homepage. It'll tell you whether the classes are canceled or not. So you want to always check the website, because I may fall ill, right? And then I have to cancel the class. So before you go out, you should always look on the website just to make sure, all right? And I try to put it right up front. It's always right on the front page, right up top. Second thing is, I had forgotten to mention this, but flock notes is what I use to communicate to everybody. So probably you all got a flock note. If you didn't get a flock note, it's because you are not signed up to get the bulletin each week. But I also use that because if you sign up over there, down below where it says sign up for emails, I try to do that on the day to say, and if I had anything I wanted to give you, I'd send it to you. Say, don't forget to look here. That's where I also send all the links. So if you go to the parish website and you get onto the returned book, then you'll be able to sign up and you'll get it, and you won't say to me, I didn't get that, which is what I hear all the time, right? So please enter your name, and then when I get the next class, you'll get another email. All right, and then you can unsubscribe if you don't want to get them anymore. That's the way it works, right? All right. Also, check the website for any additional material that might be needed, and also for the archives. I guess it's not going to do that. I must have, there it is. I want to do the pencil where I can write like this. There, see, like this. So this is the archive. So if you miss a class or you want to go back and say, that was stunning what he said, I need to go back and hear it again, you can go back and watch the class because I put them up there, all right? And they're on the bottom of the parish website. So if you wanted to say, look, I need to review that to make sure I understand it. So I figure we'll keep them up there so that people can catch up if they finally were able to come. And I know life happens, right? So we are in February 2nd. So we're doing pages 79 to 115. We're going to plant the seeds, start the conversation, and move the dialogue forward. So as you know, I always go for a time of recap so that make sure we're always very fast. So what we've done already in terms of sharing. First is recognizing that for every one person who comes into the church, 6.5 people leave the church. So you can see that's the reality we're facing. And the question is, why? That's the sad reality of this. And that most people in today's world have an approach to faith that is not Catholic, even our Catholics, that moralistic therapeutic deism. Get that in your head, because they said that's the American approach to religion. That your kids probably think that being a Catholic or being a religious person means that you're a good person. And it also means it should help you, make you feel better, right? That's the therapeutic kind. I go there because it's cheaper than going to the psychiatrist, right? And I can feel better about myself. Or the other thing is deism, is that it's a God that's not really involved in my life. I mean, I can go, I don't have a relationship with him. So the ultimate reason why anyone leaves the church, these are the four most prominent reasons. One, they leave because they're not anchored in the faith. That's one. Number two, they're not rooted in the living encounter with Jesus Christ in the church. They really don't talk about a relationship with Christ. They really don't see that as that important. That they're baptized, catechized some, but evangelized few. Right? We really haven't done a great job. You probably sent all your kids to catechism. They could possibly, even in a Catholic school, get an A on their exam in religion, but have no relationship with Christ, right? And that's why I was telling them when I was teaching religion, and they're like, well, I don't believe this stuff. And I'm like, I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm asking you to know it, because this is a class. You got to pass the test. You have to know it. Whether you believe it or not, that's for something else than religion class. Religion class, I'm going to teach you the faith. This is what we believe. Now, it's very different to say, well, how do I believe that? Because then you take them on retreats, and that's called campus ministry, and you feed the poor and that stuff. But that's not learning the faith. There's a body of knowledge you got to know. Doesn't necessarily mean you believe it, but it's what we happen to know. All right? And that you need to create a culture that encounters and unites young people to Jesus. That's ultimately what happens. So 6 main types of Catholics that fall away. We have the cultural Catholics. Most kids who are baptized as an infant, they're culturally Catholic. Right? They just grew up as a Catholic in this culture, in your family. The shruggers are those you just can't you can't move them. They're like, will you go to church? Well, I'll go. No big deal. It's like those people, shruggers, who drive me crazy. So don't ever do this if you're in the hospital. Would you like to get anointed? Yeah, wouldn't hurt. I got nothing else to do while I'm laying in this bed. I'm like, well, forget that crap. I'm going home. I'm not coming up here if there's sure, why not? Got nothing else while I'm laying here, a little bored. So anyway, the spiritual but not religious, right? They don't see the religious as, they don't see the religious side of it as also spiritual. The moral movers are those who move among different Christian religions looking for something. Moral movers, it's about morality more than anything else. It's the religious switchers that are moving around to try to find something that connects with them. And then the skeptics are those that always say, I believe in science. Science is my God, that idea. They're all a skeptic. I don't know if I believe this. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I believe that. So anyway, You have to find out which one your child is if you're going to try to begin to move like the main ticks. Myths the following way, that they'll come back once they're married when they have kids. That's not true. Matter of fact, people are getting married much later now, so that's been fallen away from a much longer time, right? And they're not faithful enough to even think they have to have the kids baptized. In my own family, they're not baptized. And they're like, really? I'm like, what am I going to do? Baptize them. No, I would never do that against the parents. Well, Mass in Catholic schools are enough. That's a myth. They are not enough. If you send your kid to a Catholic school, he will come out an atheist. We're telling you that. They almost all do. So I know sorry about that. Online, they'll quote that mine. All of a sudden, it'll be a short. They come out an atheist. They go to a Catholic school. Partly because they just sort of feel like they get their religion in the classrooms and stuff like that, and it's not faith. That's why sometimes the strongest campus ministries are those in non-Catholic schools, because those who are there, they really want it. They work really hard to keep it that way, but not all of them. Parents' fault that they left, that's a myth. It's not your fault that they left the church. So we can put that aside, right? Could be, but that's a myth that it's always a parent's fault. Because some people, they did the best they could, right? If they won't listen, it's impossible to discuss faith with their children. That's not true. I know, I talk to parents all the time. They're petrified of talking to their children about faith because they know they're going to get a lot of junk back, right? So they don't want to. But that's a myth. You can talk, and that's what we're going to start opening up right now. And that this is hopeless, and of course it's not, because it's never hopeless with God. So the problem often is not their faith, it's your bad relationship with them. That's usually the problem, is that we have a hard time talking to our children about faith, about anything, So that's where we're going. And I have a lot of reasons for that, I think. And part of that is our culture. But anyway, I'm throwing this out anyway, because the odds are against parents, because they grow up watching cartoons, and in almost every cartoon, the children are the smartest people in the room, right? And and oftentimes the adults are the dumbest people in the room. And the children have to often, in the cartoons or in the sitcoms, they have to get their parents to see the truth. That's the whole goal. It's never the children learning about life. It's always or adults giving good advice. And My Three Sons is long gone. It's really about them finally trying to figure out how they can get their parents to see the truth, and they're often working against. If you watch Saved by the Bell, which is I think a lot of your kids probably grew up on, all the adults were just idiots on that show. They didn't, it was the kids who ruled, and of course the kids like to watch that. So 5 mistakes are almost certain to keep your child away. Forcing your child to go to church. We're talking about older ones. Younger ones, you take them whether they want to go or not. But, right? That's it. All right. Number 2, criticizing his lifestyle or their lifestyles, right? Boys, girls. That he always used the male pronoun just to kind of make it easier on the ear. But criticize it. Whatever he's doing, falling away. If you criticize your kids all the time, and then you start bringing faith into it, that they're going to, nagging your children, we just know they lose heart. You nag. Dismissing your children's objections, I watch parents do that all the time. They say something like, well, I don't know if I believe in God with you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. And they're like, that's not a good idea. And I'm like, oh. And then assume that you can change your adult child. He is, and she is who he is, and she is, right? So that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to manipulate your child. We're not trying to change your child. We're trying to give you the tools to open up a discussion with your child. That's where we're going. All right? The thresholds that we talked about is the initial trust, spiritual curiosity, openness, then they seeking, and then they become a disciple. In other words, you're not going to just turn them into a disciple. There has to be steps that they cross over, that any human being, it's not your child, any human being must cross over. And maybe you haven't yet crossed over. And that's why it's harder for you, because you're trying to bring them to some place you've not been yourself, which is what we're going to try to deal with. All right? You should pray, fast, and sacrifice. So one of the things Brandon Vogt, the the author says, first and foremost, you got to take a look at yourself and your own faith and your own spirituality, because you are not getting them to go to church as the first step. It's the last step. So you have to start praying, fasting, and sacrificing for this event that you're going to try to embark on. All right? They gave ideas, and I just wanted to throw them out so we didn't forget them. The rosary, the novena, time of adoration for the Blessed Sacrament, divine chaplet. But more importantly, too, you have to equip yourself. So these are the questions that you need to ask yourself. Why do you believe? You have to answer that question yourself. All right? You have to come to something. So I just did. You know that's not going to. I grew up Catholic. Like, that may be fine for you, but that's never going to satisfy. You have to come up with, now, why do you become Catholic? So, and why do you believe, and why are you Catholic? And then you have to be, I put it in yellow, because why should I be Catholic? Why should your child be Catholic? Right? Why do you want him back in the church? Why do you want him practicing the faith? You have to have a good answer for that that's convincing for him or her as well. You know? Because if you don't know what you're aiming for in the end, you could see why it's all over the place. So, any questions so far? No questions at all? Good. That was all the last two classes. First and foremost, obviously, we're going to start now with planting the seed. Plant the seeds. All right. You must first, we're going to do, the step is plant the seeds. That's simple. Remember, this is the long journey. This is a long journey. This is not going to happen tomorrow. By God's grace, it could, by the way. But that's not where we're headed. First thing you have to do is begin the process. And if you read the book, it's about Emily's story about she leaves for college, right? And then she becomes sexually active, right? Which probably any of your kids who are in school right now could possibly, right? And then they start falling away from the spiritually kind of passive, right? And so you know that is the world they're headed into when they start going to college. So you have to come with some idea that I got to do presentation mode. There we go. It didn't show up there, right? Yeah, no. All right, because I got to know what the next slide is. Most important thing, so I know when to switch, is that you have to have this absolute understanding of unconditional love. All right, that they have to have that. Because any child that feels like totally cut off, and they give that example, they give lots of examples, that's why you should read it, and I've heard parents say that, we're done with them. We are done, right? If anything, if that's the case, and there could be a lot of times because there's some pretty nasty children that some people have raised, right? And they're very mean to their parents. And that's what he brings up. It's like, look, we're done because he's so disrespectful to my wife, and I will not have that in this house, or that he's not working, he's lazy, he's spending all the money, he's in debt. We're done trying to get him out of debt, which they keep saying. So but if you're going to embark on this process because you want to lead him back to church, you really do need to establish that kind of bond that is pretty clear about love. That's why they talk about you really have to kind of learn to forgive. Yeah, and really make the reconciliation a big part of your life. Maybe apologize for the things you've done. Ask for forgiveness from your own children for the things you said and did. But first of all, they need to know that unconditional love, and that it's a safe place if you're going to talk about faith, because that's what we're going to end up having you talk about. All right, and they have to know without a doubt that you care for them. Boy, you guys look pretty serious on that statement. Yeah. It has to be unmistakable. The first instinct is oftentimes to tell them what they're doing wrong. You need to start going back to church, right? We don't approve of your lifestyle, right? And then obviously when you move that, or I don't know why you're living with your girlfriend, you were raised better than that, right? And then obviously what that does is shut them right down, right? So, and you don't have to, you can't just say it. Obviously, they know whether it's going to be words, right? You have to actually prove, you have to show it, that unconditional love. So oftentimes, if it's hard to do it in person, he gives suggestions about starting with a letter or an email or something like that for those who have had a difficult relationship or something start. And he talks about decide today that you're going to love your child today and work on this relationship. Because it's not going to work at all if you don't have a relationship with him or her, all right? This kind of has to be no strings attached, because what's going to happen is you have to love them, learn to love them right up front, no matter what, because we're going to ask them to tell you things that you might not like to hear. But they only would ever tell you, in a real life, is if it's a safe place to say it. If they feel like you're going to judge them or they shouldn't believe that because you told them they shouldn't believe that, the last thing they're going to do is tell you, right? And you're going to be able to. But our goal right now is to open up a conversation so that you can truly hear what they're telling you, right? And for whatever reason, right? And possibly because that that you're communicating to them, to your child, that all you want is what is best for them. All right? And they know that. Even if they don't agree with what you think is best for them, right? Because they don't see it that way, they need to hear that all I want is what's best. What's for your good. All right? And so I think we all know that forgiveness for things that have happened have to somehow come out, right? On both sides, It's I like the little story. Did you see the little story in there about Paco? So Hemingway tells a story about this estranged man. Man and his son is estranged, and he tries to reconcile with him, and he doesn't know where he is, and so he puts an article in the paper saying, Paco, come home. We'll meet at this place, and we'll try to reconcile. And then when he got there was because Paco, I guess, is a very popular name, almost like saying John, that the crowd, they had to call the police. The crowd was unmanageable. All these Johns looking to reconcile with their father, She tells that story, But I think it's hard. It's hard, but forgiveness has to happen, because a lot of the reasons why people leave their faith is because their faith is often connected to you, because that's what you give, right? That's the big thing. And being able to reconcile with the past is a beautiful thing anyway. But notice he puts this right up front. It has to ask. You have to be specific too. He challenges you to be very specific about the kind of thing you're going to ask forgiveness for, which chances are, if you sat around and you thought about it, you might know what you need to ask for forgiveness for. And I think it's hardest for parents, he writes, but he says the hardest thing is that for most parents, he says, and he's got his kids, and probably you can say that, is that once, if it was done and it was successful and it worked, most people would say, I wish I had done it sooner. I wish we had reconciled sooner, especially if we did it, if you followed the right steps with just open arms. Look, I'm not here anymore. I just want to continue to have a relationship with you. Okay? So, unconditional love. Let's move through forgiveness. The next thing is to take any kind of interest in anything your children are involved in. Not for you, but for them. And I do this all the time. actually, with the parishioners. There are some things you could do I could care less about. But I know that if I have to have a relationship with you, I have to be interested in the things you're interested in, right? They say, well, look, first we have like 9 masses in the parish. They're all different, right? You go to any mass, they're all the same mass. Now, people would say, well, which one do you like? I said, I'll tell you which one I would go to if I were a parishioner. But I'm not a parishioner. I'm the pastor. I have to put all of these on because they're like, well, do you like this one or that style? I'm like, it doesn't matter what I like because I'm not here I'm not going to mass for me, right? That's not why I'm there. So the same thing with all of you too, in terms of like, well, the one he gives, and I think it's so true, is music. I remember if my nephew ever watches it, he had this song that was awful, and I hated it. He loved that grunge stuff. And I remember asking him about the lyrics, and I'm like, this is so, but I'm like, really? Wow, that's very interesting, But being interested just to be a part of someone's life, and some of it might be interesting, or just interesting why your kid likes it, And I think that, well, that's for them. But being involved in that, and we're talking about adults now, we're not talking about children, so you're not down there playing Chutes and Ladders. We're talking about adults, right? Those are the good things. I'd be interested in playing Chutes and Ladders, right? But anything you can enjoy together. So notice that what he's saying, right? So if there's a relationship to repair, you're repairing a relationship, then you're taking interest in something. So it has nothing to do with religion right now. Notice we're not talking about faith. We're talking about establishing a relationship. You're not going to draw your kids back to God if you have no relationship with them. So you have to start there and be involved in anything. And then I like this one here because this is the one my mother did. Should keep us. So the house of hospitality, right? That my mother made sure, she always wanted to make sure that we loved being at home. So whether it was food or the game, on TV, she knew we're all watch the Patriots on Sunday afternoon. She would make sure there was a lot of food. She would just making sure that that it's filled with fun and laughter and anything you can do to kind of build that relationship. But it's tough now because parents and children are far away from each other now. Back in our day, my mother moved two built houses down from where her mother lived, and then my grandmother then moved into that house, our house, and so our street was a long time, and my mother lived on that street, even before we were born. So we have pictures, her wedding pictures are taken in the house 2 down from us, and by the way, the street was Green Street, and it had nothing to do with my name, because they would say that too, be like, I call. Remember we used to have to call? We would buy those records on TV, the top 10 disco rock songs. So, and I'd be like, Greenleaf, 50 Green Street. Oh, really? Is that your shade? I'm like, yeah. Oh, we live in Greenville, Maine. No! I'm like, no, I don't. I live in Biddeford. Right? So, anyway, is that Biddeford, Maine? And they said, is that in the United States? I'm like, really? So, anyway, you call those people. So anyway, the idea is that the prodigal son is, if the story of the prodigal son becomes important, is that it's something they want to come back to. It's a home they want to come to, all right? Because the deepest concern, obviously, is going to be where your son's or daughter's heart is, not not their actions first. That's what we want to get to. We want to get to the heart. So the last thing you want to do is create all kinds of requirements for them to spend time with you, right? And it's tough. Then he goes ahead. So once you've cultivated a home and everything, is you have to plant. Oops, did I mess that up? Oh, I think I hit the wrong button. No, I forgot to change it. Okay. All right. Oh yeah, no, I did it right. Yeah, right. Because that was under A. My outline, right? I have to have an outline. First, then you start planting the seeds. And that's what we're going to do. So we're not talking to them. Once you invite them in the house, you repair the relationship, now you plant the seeds, right? Which is just, he gives suggestions, which I know happens all the time. You just leave things around, right? Leave things around that they might be interested in. Some of you already do that, right? Whether it's a CD, a DVD. Now this is what people do, and I see it all the time. You send if you're going to say, you know what, your child's far away from the church, or you send them all this political stuff or all this crazy religious stuff that's on the fringe about the end of the world and how they better change their life, and some of the Blessed Mother's messages from Medjugorje and how they need to, and it's like that is not what he's talking about, all right? He's talking about some very basic, good, holistic stuff of faith. You leave things around that they can, that you're trying to inspire them in some way. The story about, the Carol who's watching the Catholicism Project. So they invite him to the home, and on the TV is the Catholicism Project. And all of a sudden, she starts watching it with him, right? And that changes, and she's Jewish, becomes Catholic. But you can read the story. I don't need to show you, but it's in the book. But this idea of it was just on, and when now it doesn't mean that you're manipulating them. That's not what we're trying to do. But we're trying to offer something that this is who you are, hopefully. You're not, that you would be watching something that you're putting on there. All right? And that's why once you're going to have a discussion with them, it's going to be including sharing helpful articles and videos, if that works for them. But oftentimes you have to be on their platform. So you have to be on what they're on as well, which is not my interest. But anyway, so because they're going to come up, if you open that up, if you open a discussion, they're going to start talking about some things. And then say, hey, what we talked about. But we are not talking about sending them, over this religious stuff. We're talking about inspirational, nice stuff that gets them thinking about stuff that they had not thought of. All right? So one of the things he uses as an example, and Bishop Barron uses this all the time, is that Bob Dylan, he's a big fan of Bob Dylan, Bishop Barron. So he uses that example about the fact that, you like Bob Dylan, and then you go and you see some Bob Dylan video, he talks about him, and some songs, and you pass him. So another one would be like, you guys are going to see a movie. Well, that there's a Catholic, take on those movies. So you'd say, hey, we went to the movie and we saw, Green Acres came to my mind. I have no idea why. Probably that Green Acres. And so, we saw this video done by this great video on Green Acres, not on the fact that the end of the world's happening. It's just on whatever it is they're interested in, or if they like something like building things, that there's nice religious thing that they could build. So you're trying to make that connection. All right. Any thoughts? So anyway, I have that on my notes. Send your child things that boost also their faith, their inspiration, not crazy end of the world things. So no one seed will ever work. We're going to try this, but that we're saying that maybe as you plant these kinds of things, thinking about how I can engage them, your child, without being overtly. You need to start going to church, right? You need to start. That's what you need to do. That's your problem. So you don't go to church enough, right? So now, after all that, the conversation starts, and let's start the conversation. What I think is interesting is, and this I know this because I lived it too, but so only 8% of parents actually speak to their children about religion. So you can see there's a problem. I mean, we're talking about never, like maybe you grew up and never talked about God to your religion, to your children. only 8% actually talk to children every day, and 20% maybe once a week when it's time to go into Mass. So you talk about your children. So you can see, what I was thinking of is how many people never have ever talked to their children about faith. Anything that's faith related. And that it's sad because sometimes they wouldn't even think of coming to you to talk. They go find something online, or they go to their friends. And this is true, and he says this, and I absolutely believe it. It is so much easier to talk to strangers about faith than anybody in your family. And that's the reality. I think that's where the devil gets in. And I know because, everybody knows him. My nephew's a nice guy. He's a lawyer now, but he's a Mormon, and I told him, he had some questions. I said, talk to me about faith. But he wouldn't. And maybe because, of course, I'm a priest, so that would be one thing. But some people aren't baptized, and trying to have a conversation with them is really tough. So the whole reason why we have this book in class, because this is not an easy thing you're dealing with. And that it's so much easier to talk to strangers about faith than it is with your own parents. And I think sometimes, to be honest with you, is because parents go overboard all the time. It's like, I want to talk to you about, having my child baptized. Oh, I have to tell you, this is what you're supposed to do. And it's like, it's like the conversation ends and the parenting begins, And especially, it's harder to work with that way in adults. It's great when your child's 8. It's not great when your child's 25, right? And that's our problem. So the idea is not that he talks about. And I just have a slide with a picture of a father and a son trying to have a conversation, and the idea he gives is that right away your stance can't be confrontational. Right away, but it's curious, kind of like really, the big phrase, really. I remember that changed for me in youth ministry when I was doing all the youth ministry. When I talk to the kids, they tell me what they believe because they tell you shocking things, right? And I think they want to see how I react as a priest, right? And I'm like, really? I remember saying, so where did you learn that? Where did you get that? And he said, well, I thought it all myself. I'm like, then I made a big mistake, because then I said, this is with high school kids, that's funny. That sounds like something you learn on MTV. Oh, that did not go over well. Because I was like, But what's very, very important is to not embarrass your child for whatever it is he or she believes, or whatever she's done. You could imagine if it's really even big, like, having an affair, leaving their children, whatever it is, all that stuff that is the back of it, to not embarrass your child, is not to coerce them, and discover but just to kind of find out what's going on in their head, what's going on in their heart, and help them kind of work through some of that. But he is very clear, this is done only after you're fasting and you're praying for your child, that you're asking God first and foremost to give you all the graces you need. Just another kind when you're having two people, all right? Because you have to be in a spot where you really say, I'm trying to do this also for them in their relationship with God. Any questions? Yes.
Not really a question.
It's not a question yet.
Strange that.
I'm going to repeat it only so that they can hear it online, okay?
Okay. So before I headed out tonight to come here,
Before you headed out tonight to come here.
my daughter Kate, who's Steve's only daughter.
Okay,
and
Steve's only daughter.
They don't go to Mass. They had both the boys baptized, but I just thought it was so strange that she called me when I was like 10 minutes from leaving to come here. And so I must have said something about, oh yeah, I've got like 25 more minutes to jet, then I've got to leave. She was like, oh, where are you going? And I said, catechism class. And she didn't say anything for a second. She said, catechism class? I said, yeah. And I know what she was thinking. I'm pretty sure. she was like, you go to church all the time. Why do you need to go to catechism class? You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure that's what she was thinking. But anyway, it was interesting because in that conversation, I got to share with her that I see one of her very good friends. They were nurses together at one point at Mass every Sunday. So I said to her tonight, oh, I saw Nicole again. We had a nice chat. She gave me a big hug. And
Oh, nice.
so, you know, but you have to be careful.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you know, because one of the things is that, you know, that he gives in the book, and remind, is that you, and just like you did too, you don't start with the faith conversation. You start with something about her life, something that she can make a connection with. But you know, because, and you know, this sounds so obvious, but you know it's not, that show first and foremost that you care, that you care about them, all right, and that you'll dialogue about anything with them, you know, and at the right time, you know, hopefully there'll be something where he wants to talk about something spiritual. I saw that with with a lot of the people where a lot of stuff I did is just, we just casually talk about everything. And then I know if I have a good relationship with someone, I know that as soon as they have a question, they'll be able to come and talk to me. But, you know, or if I can bring something up at a time, but that it starts in the very, so what are you doing? What'd you do today? You know, being interested in their life. So I know that parents don't do that so much anymore, like, you know, because, wow, everybody's so busy, right? But that's one of the things we've also lost, right, is our relationships with everybody. But because when you catch up on each other's Facebook page, right, to see what's going on, rather than, it's tough to talk. So if you're, a lot of times, one of the things he acknowledges, and I think it's absolutely true, you're probably going to be afraid to bring anything up, right? And that, he acknowledged that you got to think about what would be the worst thing that could happen if I bring something up, right? But we are not yet talking about anything, you know, overtly going to Mass. Right? We're talking about just anything in their life. So remember that this is not a quick convert your child scheme. This is building the relationship first. So I like his phrases, and he has it. First thing you do is you listen. And then the next thing you do is you listen. And then the third thing you do is you listen some more, right? So listen first, he says second, third time. And act, and this is funny, you'll know I will do this all the time. Act like you're interested, right? Because some people will tell me, like, you know, my brain sometimes, like, I really don't care about this. But I know that she cares about this, and that's what's important, right? And that's why I'm not here for what she's telling me. I'm here for her, right? And I think that if we can get through that, so, and that's why make your child think that you're agreeable, and it really disarms them. It's like, oh, if they didn't hear, it's like, well, you know, I think I'm moving in with my girlfriend, you know, and you're like, what? If you're like, oh, really? Just listen to, why do you want to do that? What's the matter? What's happened? Why are you doing that? You know, and not at all like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Why are you doing that? So you're just interested, and so that your child, first thing your child is disarmed from waiting to see what's going to happen. It's like, oh, we're going to go tell my parents this, right? And that's, you know, is serious. So he gives a chance to vocalize, and I just took a picture of it because I didn't want to type it all in. You know, so these are questions that help kind of start looking like, tell me about what kind of role faith played while growing up, if any. How would you describe your idea of Catholicism or Christianity? You know, who do you look up to? What personality traits are most attractive to the person? I often do this with spirituality. When we do spiritual direction, is who do you admire most about faith? Because that's going to tell you something about, you know, how do you handle the rough parts of life? What are you passionate about? What brings meaning to your life? What makes you happy? You know, who would you like to continue? Would you like to continue the conversation? Would you be interested in learning more about God? You know, do you pray? Would you mind describing it for me? Right? Do you believe in the relationship with God as possible? So these are all questions that he wants you to have in the back of your mind to begin to think as you're listening to what's going on. All right? Any reaction? I've got to stop because I can keep going. The other thing, too, is one of the best ways in conversation, we learn this in the art of conversation. You'll hear us doing this all the time if once we listen to you, is to repeat back what they've told you. Because what I have done, and I do this with two people who are not talking, husband and wife, they'll come and sit in front of me. They have a problem. I'm like, did you hear what he said? What did he just say? And then you realize she didn't hear it at all. She did not hear. That's not at all what he said. But that's what it goes on in our minds. And that's one of the reasons why you are not always hearing this. So did I hear you say, or what I hear you saying is, and I think that's kind of very important, because then it gives you a chance to kind of correct something. I don't, and it cannot be, are you telling me that, which is what I hear too sometimes. It's like, so what I hear saying is, are you financially in trouble? Is that why you're living together? Or do you want to marry her? Is that why you're living? Is this a step to marry? You want to go back and listen to what it is. Is that what you're saying? All right? I think that's important, yeah?
Yeah, my children, pretty much all three of them, when they're adults, they'll let me know, they'll call me on the mat, they'll act like I wasn't listening. They will definitely hold me accountable.
Your children will hold you accountable because, you're not listening.
Sometimes I'm not, it's something I do want to work on, where I want to show them that I am listening in a more caring way. It's something I'm working on.
Oh, yeah.
You can get distracted.
I'm just repeating so that the people online can hear. Get distracted, and you've got you've got a lot of baggage. We all do. It's not you. We all have a lot of baggage. So we're filtering this through all kinds of things, and and then sometimes. So what I hear you telling me is you don't believe anymore, and I'm like, he didn't say that. He didn't say he didn't believe. One of the things I think he gives that example is like, I don't go to mass because it's boring. I don't get it. Right? I don't get it. So you don't believe in God? That's not what he said. So you don't want to be Catholic anymore? That's not what he said. He's like, he's getting nothing out of Mass. Try to focus on what exactly is he trying to say? Because if you don't hear it, you'll never be able to kind of help. That's why you got to hear it. So he goes through we'll talk about the 5 most powerful questions. I'd like to hear what you think about them. All right? The whole point, by the way, is to ask questions, not to teach your child anything. For this phase, you just keep asking and asking questions. All right? And the first is, what do you believe about? What? And the one that gives it marriage. They go, what do you believe about marriage? We're not talking about what do you believe about God immediately. All right? If they say, with all the evil in the world, what do you believe about evil? Get something to talk about. It's like, with all this in the world, and getting them to talk instead. You don't ever assume that you know the answer for what your child believes or doesn't believe, or how he would answer that question. People say that, I know he believes. Like, you have no idea if he believes. They'll say that, he doesn't go to Mass, but I know he believes in God. How do you know that? So you never assume that. Let him tell, right? And you want they should be questions that help him reflect on things, right? And be careful, because he may not have an answer for anything of this. And that's what happens a lot of times when I ask the young people. They might parrot back to you exactly what they heard someone else say. And then, or what they think you want to hear, what you want to hear. All right? And this is one I use this one a lot. So why do you believe that? Why do you believe that's true? You'll hear me say that all the time when I'm talking when they're trying to confront me, especially in faith and stuff like this. I'm like, So, and that's why, where did you learn that? Was the one I've often, and that's kind of true with the next one is, how did you come to believe that? I don't believe it's wrong to have sex outside of marriage. Why do you believe that's true? How did you come to know that? Because I think he gives this, I think, on generic fallacy, where he says it's rejecting a belief because of where it came from. So you be careful of that. So he's like, well, you just heard that from your friends, or you just heard that from. One of the things they talk about is like, we'll talk about oftentimes, there'll be more to talk about this later in the book, but, well, I believe in same-sex marriage, right? Well, why? Right? And they're going to tell you probably, well, because some of my friends, I heard from my friends, in love, because I believe in love, And the first thing you can do is like, well, that's not love, because, or they tell you that that's love. That all just destroys that right down. Because you'll hear in a few minutes that that's a one way. Well, of course it is. There is a sense of love there. We think it's a little different, but you can listen to it anyway. So I think it's also important to find out where did your children become to believe that? Did they just learn it in class, right? And they're repeating what someone told. One of the things I often bring is the Inquisition. They bring that up all the time, or the Crusades, because they've been to college and they learn about the Crusades and they learn about the Inquisition, and then I'm like, so how did you come to know that? And well, they learned it, from a teacher from a state university who hates Catholicism, right? And but get them to talk about, did you ever think about another way to look at that? You think that's the only way to look at that? I mean, so trying to kind of get them without correcting their belief right away. Well, some will say, well, Hitler was a friend of the Pope, right? It was that book that came out, and then there was another book that came out that said that said that the Pope, Pius, that was it 9th, 10th, 12th, something like, was it 9th, 10th or 11th or 12th, whatever. Anyway, see, you scared her. So who even harbored, who sheltered many of the Jews and gave it. So there's a lot of discussion on that, but you can see that a lot of times, and we have this problem, is that they've only learned from one professor from that slanted view. And you have to say, that's why where did you learn that? And, is that the only way to look at that? Why do you believe that? And this is one of the ones I used when I was a seminarian, because they'll say a very short sentence, and I'll say something like, and I said this to Father, I don't even know Father Kent Willett. He's a Madawaska, he's now retired. But he was a older priest, and I was the vocation director. And he said a sentence, and I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, what do you mean, what do I mean by that? And I was like, and so now we all laugh about that. Every time I say, what do you mean, what do I mean by that? Well, I said, you got to put some words around it. Because they say, well, the church is evil. Well, what do you mean by that? Let talk about it. Tell me what you mean by that. Well, the first thing you don't do is say, well, the church is the largest charitable organization in the world. Well, that's not listening to them, right? It's correcting them right away. It's like, well, why do you mean that? Well, the way they treat women, I can hear them all because I've been through them all, And I remember having a discussion about the fact that, well, the church has to deal with the validity of the sacrament. And you could see that all of a sudden they never really thought. I said, how do you know that the body and blood of Christ is really the body and blood of Christ? What guarantee do you have? Right? Because can anybody just say those words? And then all of a sudden it started a whole discussion about what makes the Eucharist valid. and how the church struggles to maintain the validity of the Eucharist. Because if it doesn't have a valid Eucharist, then it's idolatry. It's not the body and blood of Christ that we are kneeling down in front of a piece of bread. But we don't say that we're kneeling down. We're saying where something is consecrated. Well, then what makes it consecrated? And how do you know it actually is? And would you go anywhere where it might not be consecrated? Because maybe it's not, right? If I told you, and I remember having a discussion, if I told you that this church, I know it only has a male priesthood, but they believe that because of the male, they reach back to the apostles, and that the entire church around the world, east and west, protects very clearly what the bread we use, what words we use, and who can say it. Because it guarantees that when you go to Mass, that you are receiving the body and blood of Christ. Next door, they've kind of changed some things because they believe things differently. So it may or may not be. And it's not based on whether you think it is or not. It's based on something objective. Because if I think it is and you don't think it's not, right? If you think it is and I don't think it is, one of us is right. Because it can't be right for you and we can't both be right. So the whole point in having this discussion would be to talk about, not about women's ordination, but what makes the Eucharist valid. What makes, and that was a word he had never, ever heard before. But for the church, in studying it, it's very clear that it wants to make sure that what you get is the body and blood of Christ. And that's why when the Holy Father said, John Paul II, it doesn't have the authority to change that any more than it can change the bread or change the wine into grape juice or change anything like that, or change the words. It doesn't have the authority to do that. That's why those words are in bold print, and I have to say those words. I can't say anything else. And when priests were saying anything else, the church came back and corrected it. You can't do that. That's not for you to touch. So that's part of it. And the church says, it will put in doubt the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And that is not something the church is going to risk, right, for us. Because, and it's not just because it doesn't want to do it, it doesn't believe that, but it's because that's what it's always believed, and that's what the Eastern Church believes, and that's what the Western Church, the entire Orthodox Catholic Church believes. Saying we're not, and that's a risk that I'm not willing to take, and I think that's very important for us. And for me, that was a very convincing argument to let's not mess around with the sacraments for this generation and for every generation that come after us. But you can see, if you don't believe in the body and blood of Christ, body and blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, that argument doesn't stand. But you only get that far by having a conversation about it. So anyway, that was a long story about that. But what do you mean by that? It's a very significant question. And what would you say to someone who says, he uses this argument to get it off of the two of you? Like, what do you say? Because what would you say to someone who says that, they don't believe in God? What would you say to that person? What would you say to someone who says? And I've often done that by saying, well, then what advice would you give someone? And then they often give much better advice than they're willing to take themselves. So my point in making sure we go through this is that you truly see that what he is trying to say, if you're going to draw your children to Mass or draw it back to God, that the questions should stay way open and you should be ready to hear anything that might come back. Any thoughts? So you guys really, it's like a whole pastoral plan that you've got, right? It's like you want the Ozempic shot instead, right? Can you just fix him? Parents do that to me all the time. He's got a question. Answer it for me, right? I need to take care of it. And I'm like, I think the issue is really going to be about your relationship. So I found this nice little question move this little slide. You got to know kind of what the biggest roadblocks are for them in returning back to the church. What is the big thing that's keeping them away? And you have to realize that the first couple of things they tell you probably aren't it at all, right? And you only learn that by talking some more to them, just letting them talk, never shutting them down. All right? So, and what's the, asking them, well then, what is the one thing that's stopping you from returning? What would be the one thing, if ever you get that far, what would be the one thing that really bugs you about the Catholic Church? You know, and then what happens sometimes, like everyone else who comes and talks, is that once you say it, it's not that bad. You know, it's like when it's in your head, it seems like looming. And then you say it and like, well, that wasn't that exciting. Well, I don't like, you know what, remember if you ever watch Everybody Loves Raymond? Like she asks him that, why don't you go to church? And he says, it's the kneelers. You know I have bad knees. I always thought that was funny. Anyway, it's the kneelers. That's why I don't want to go. I don't like, you know. So anyway, he does some other reasons, but he begins to realize that he's like, really? That's the reason why you're not going? No, you wouldn't do that to your child because you'd be like, well, that's a dumb reason. You know, but getting that person to talk. This is very, 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 very important. And it's one that I just thought was funny because I couldn't find one, is that you really have to absorb the criticism of the church, of criticism of the church. Just accept it. We do it all the time. You know, like I was at a restaurant. Someone came over and started talking to me about how unfriendly my parish is, right? And the lady next to me was really upset that I didn't challenge her, right? You know, and I said, you know, because I'm convinced, by the way, that the parish is as friendly and unfriendly as you are. Because the friendliest people in the world find so many friends here. And the meanest people in the world only seem to find the mean people in the world here. It's amazing. I don't get it. Because I'm like, look, I bet you know what friendly people do? They go up and they say, hey, how's it going? You know? And if that one says, they go like, oh, that guy's crazy. How are you doing? You know? Because he's wicked friendly. But the other one, unfriendly people usually find their friends, you know? And so I think we have the friendliest parish in the diocese, right? But it probably says more about the people I hang around with than all of them, because there are some cranky people here, right? But there are cranky people everywhere. So, and I'm not, present company excluded, right? I'm not looking at anybody. But what do they say? Well, you know, the church, the church treats women as second-class citizens. And you just have to accept that without trying to defend some of this stuff. And I was a big defender. I remember in seminary, I was written up by being defensive, that I was known as being defensive. And then I remember telling my advisor, you know, it's a catch-22, because if I try to defend myself about being defensive, that's being defensive. So how do I get out of this loop, you know? Because no matter what, I'm going to be defensive. I'm trying to defend. And the big thing was, you don't need to defend anything. I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to defend the church. I don't need to stand up for the church is big enough, and it belongs to God. And God can deal with it, right? God will be able to deal with this. He's much smarter than any of us, right? And he's allowed these things to happen. And I think the time that I dealt with was that look, in the end, God knows. And I don't say that, like, God knows. No, really, that's a deep spirituality. God knows this. He knows what we're doing. He knows what's happening. I don't have to tell him that, like he's an idiot or something, and so there's a sense of, look, I don't know if you remember, but it was an important part of discovery with the pandemic that was happening, and everybody it's like, look, divine providence has allowed this to happen. It's not like God was weak and couldn't fix this. He could. And I don't know why he didn't. And it's not. I'm not writing his paycheck, right? God's paycheck. He is my God. He doesn't report to me. So I had to come and say, God's providence allowed this to happen because I believe in God's providence. Therefore, my goal is to remain faithful as possible and do the good I'm called to do in the midst of this. I'm not here to fix it, the pandemic. Jesus Christ already saved the world, right? And he already saved your children. Now what you're doing, this idea that you just have to accept kind of the reality of the world and who's president and who's not, and know that in the end you don't defend all this. And if so many people are either angry or they're, and they're defensive, they're trying to fix these things. I'm like, they're wasting a lot of energy because you don't need to even defend the church. When I found out I didn't need to do that, a whole big load came off my shoulders. It's not my job to defend the diocese and their actions in the end. I just don't understand them. That's all. And it's not, it's above my pay grade, as they say. My brother keeps telling me, stay in your lane. This is not your lane, right? And so I'm like, okay. So there's a lot of criticism, sarcasm in the church about the church, and just be ready to that's fine. The church can handle it. Christ died on the cross. He was spit upon, and that is not going to ever change. So, and the other thing is he gives for advice is when they do interrupt, is to not interrupt them. Let them say exactly what they need. And let them know that you're not going to be offended by that, by what they say. Because when someone comes and tells me a lot of these things, and now, of course, I'm acting like I've always been this way, but I think it comes from doing youth ministry for like 10 years, because they'll say anything, and to not at all react. I remember one time where we were learning this in seminary because we hear confessions. And it was very clear to the professor that we are not to react to anything that is said. So, and we had to do mock confessions. We had to sit there, and he would be the confessor, and he would say all kinds of things. And we were not to respond. We're not to giggle. We're not to laugh. Like, you did what? Like, oh my gosh. He's making them all up, and I'm like, okay, nobody's done that, right? So, but the idea is that you're not, even for you, don't react to your child. Don't react to anything he says. And sometimes, they're prodding you for a reaction. And that's one of the things when I learned that, the kids, they're prodding me. I'm like, I'm not going to react to what they've said. Really? So you think we're all just going to go in the ground and die? That's really sad.
It's hard for me to have a poker face sometimes, so when you're hearing things, because my face is very demonstrative, so, because I will. So,
yeah, but that all that communication is happening because that happened when your little child was a baby and he looked into your face. He already interpreted things that you were doing and saying, whether you were pleased or not with him. You could tell right away. My sister could stand here and give you 10 facial expressions my mother would give her, and without ever talking, right? That she knew. She knew exactly. Don't you roll those eyes at me. Right? So let venting happen. Just let it happen. Just keep it going. It'll help clarify. Matter of fact, the more they vent, the clearer they might become about their position. Right? Because it's like, they've got the first sentence down that they know is angry, but then they might struggle to continue to vent because then they realize, okay, that was dumb, right? Right? And then hopefully that you have a lot of patience. What time is it? Oh, no. We're going to move this conversation forward. So, and it's going to be very quick. It's going to repeat a little when you move the dialogue. Don't ever get angry. If anyone is angry, if he's angry or your child's angry, you're angry, you've already lost. The conversation's done. So don't get him angry. Don't let him get you angry. That's fine. That's fine. You can stand up. We know that he knows that. He's not dumb in the book. I mean, well, he's obviously doing what he does, is that religion causes the most fights in families anyway, right? So your goal is to make sure that it never gets to the level of anger, all right? And that you're just having a conversation, right? So that you remember that you don't talk at each other, right? Speak to each other, right? You, for yourself, you stay humble, right? You don't talk down to your child, obviously. But be careful about that, recognizing that you probably in your own time were not perfect in your own faith, right? Maybe you always were perfect. Maybe we should canonize you, but chances are you were not perfect. So recognizing that you're staying humble yourself, and I talk to people, it's like, yeah, I know sometimes it's hard to believe. It is hard. And I don't always do it right. And obviously open body language, which we're talking about, we already know, you gotta be careful on that, all right? And you wanna express the empathy, right? So, that's hard, I understand. I know your culture believes that it's very easy to see that way. You have to express that to them. And then you're gonna, this one I mentioned already, restate your child's thought. If he can't agree with what you've said when you say it back to him, then you haven't quite said it right, correctly. And then also too, you talk about sharing your own feelings. And so we learn this in seminary all the time when we're doing, to use I statements. And I feel sad. It makes me sad to know that, especially if your child was in the end hurt by someone who is a very faithful person. And I feel very sad that so you're trying to kind of express your feelings. So that's very important. But that's the way, I think what he's getting at is what really everybody is supposed to try to learn with families. It's so hard to do. Obviously, we all know that, right? So I remember we also used to take what we called a temperature check in my pastoral formation. When things are getting, let's take a temperature. Where is everybody? Where so you're just like, what's going on? And so you just kind of take a pause for a second. Let's take it down. How are you feeling? And that's why the last one is don't be afraid to kind of pause. And feeling questions are really great. We do that in seminary all the time. Matter of fact, we make fun of each other now. I say seminary because that's what we were taught. When you're in the hospital and someone says, I just found out that I get cancer. And some people would say, well, oh, really? Can they do anything for you or something? What's we're supposed to say, oh, that's hard. How does that make you feel? How are you feeling about that? Because we want to get to the feeling level or that my wife just left me. Wow, that's hard. That must feel. How are you feeling now? Because that's where we want to get to right away is the feelings, because that will then open people up very quickly. All right? And I'm going to stop right there because one of the things is clearing up some misconceptions, but we'll talk about that. And page 108 has a list of 108. I wanted to get to that. 108 was a lot of misconceptions. Do I have them here? Yeah. So 108. Chances are your child holds at least one of these positions. Being Christian is just about being a good person. You don't need to go to Mass for that. Catholics are responsible for so much violence and hate. I hear that all the time. Right? The Catholic Church is so anti-science. We all know we hear that a lot. Catholics hate gay people and deny their humanity. Catholics think that everyone who isn't Catholic is going to hell. The church condemns anyone who gets divorced. I still hear that one. Catholics worship Mary and the saints. We know that. Catholicism is all about guilt, right? Man-made rules. Hear that all the Catholics don't focus enough on Jesus and the Bible, right? Those are the people who go to other churches. That's what they say. Those are misconceptions that hopefully you have answers for by now, which are not. That's not what we believe, because that doesn't clear up. We've already decided that doesn't clear up anything, right? So you'd say, tell me more. Where did you learn that? Catholics hate gay people. Where did you learn that? Right? I'd like to eventually get to some dialogue, so I'm going to make you the child, I'm the parent, and we'll have a little dialogue and see how, let you be the child though. So I'm going to try to talk to you. Yeah. If I were your child, I could really know. I'll let you kind of push it on me. It's like, well, where did you learn that Catholics hate gay people? Because that's not, the church never taught that, And I always say, there's always a difference. It comes from Matthew Kelly, maybe. The mind of the church and the minds in the church. Very different. The mind of the church, it may be gay people, maybe Catholics who hate gay people, but that's minds in the church. The mind of the church it's very clear. The church documents want you to love your gay children. Love them with all your heart and mind and soul, right? But, there's more to say about that. But the idea of loving them doesn't mean that you accept their lifestyle, but it doesn't mean that you don't love them. Because that's the unconditional love, right? And that they know you love them, but they also know you don't approve of their lifestyle. But that's for something else.
Ecumenical friendships, because some of us have that.
Yep, ecumenical friendships.
Sometimes I've had to, where you have to give a witness to your Catholicism.
Right.
A friend might say, no, Maureen, you don't have to go to confession. You can just, I have a friend that said that.
Right.
You can just
Talk to God. You can just talk to God. Michael, I always ask too is, where did you learn that? Where did you learn that you only have to talk to God? Because the only thing they got is their pastors told them, because Jesus did not say all you have to do is talk to me. Where's that in the Bible? Now, we ask Jesus for forgiveness, but where did he say that all you have to do is just talk to me? I'd like to know that, because they do have things that might say, well, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, whatever, all that stuff. But I'd like to know kind of where did they learn that? That's all. And tell me more why you think that. And then you open up a dialogue and a conversation rather than trying to defend confession to them. Right? Because I know, one of the things there are two things. One is that I know they're trying to get us. I mean, that's the relationship, right? They need to prove for themselves, and that's what they want me to do, so that they can prove for themselves. That's the first thing. The second thing is some people do ask, but there are what we call constructive and destructive questionings, and one is and say, well, you could rephrase that in a very constructive way. Are you asking me a question? I've used that in someone else's home. Are you asking me a question, or are you telling me something? Because do you want to know why we go to confession? Or why there is confession? Or are you trying to prove your point? Because if you're trying to prove your point, I'm not in this dialogue with you. But if you want to know why I believe in confession, that's another thing. I can tell you why I believe in confession. But you can see that all of a sudden now I have to pay attention to how the question's being asked or the statements being made. And I've told people, are you asking me something or are you telling me something? Because, I don't know why Catholics go to confession. Are you asking me something or are you telling me something? Right? Don't you think it's stupid that you have to go to confession? Is that a question? Right? Because that doesn't sound like a question to me. I know your voice is going up at the end with a little question mark, but that doesn't sound like a question to me. So, that's why it sounds with the whole thing of constructive questioning and destructive questioning. Constructive questioning means you're interested in me. Are you interested in what I want to know? Destructive question, are you trying to tear me down? Are you trying to tear my faith down? Are you trying to prove your point? Why are you asking me this way? And I think that helps. It's always helped me because it puts them all on the, like, I'm not here to abuse you. All right. Should we do a little glory be? Because now we're going to get into the real topics. He's got real topics like, well, let's talk about, premarital sex. That's what we're going to talk about next. No, just kidding. Do I have any other slides? Oh, I do. Seeds of words. Yeah, that's right. He got the pebble. We'll talk about that next week. Should we do a glory be? Because it's 7:45. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. I love that phrase, though. Are you asking me a question, or are you telling me something?